So again, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this chapter training for submitting CPE packets. So I don't know if those of you on the line are new to the CPE and programming role in your chapter, or if you have done it for several years, maybe looking for an update, anything new. I think the good news going into it is that as of yet, there haven't been any changes with NASBA in the last year or two. I do think they're going to have a few changes coming out this fall. I don't know if they will affect us and our programming, but certainly if there is any changes that will affect us, I'll be sure to let everyone know appropriately. So just want to go through with introductions. My name is Debbie Williams. I'm the Director of Operations for AFWA. As far as specifically with CPE and programming, I am right now managing all of the CPE review and approvals. Also, if you all need any assistance promoting your program, whether you're just looking for some ideas or you want to share your program on the national website, I'm your go-to contact to help you with that. So I'm always happy to help to share marketing and promotion ideas. I also work with NASBA to manage AFWA's sponsorship and partnership that we have directly with them. I also wanted to put Cindy Stanley's picture and name on the screen. She's not able to join us today, but she is AFWA's Executive Director, and she is another great resource for ideas around programming, around CPE, whatever it might be. So we are your core headquarters staff. I'm going to go ahead and say now, especially for some of you who might have been doing CPE for a while, might have seen another name on the screen before as far as who was doing CPE review and approval. Right now, it's just me, so along with everything else in our two-person staff. So I have been a little bit behind on approvals and not getting them done quite as quickly as maybe in the past, but it's definitely still an important item on our list, and so we're getting through them as quickly as we can. So your responses have been a little bit slow. I just wanted to let you know that that was why. Hopefully we'll get somebody else helping us with those soon, and then that'll be able to speed up the process a little bit. So for those of you on the line, I don't know if just to make it a little more engaging, we are a national organization. If you want to utilize the chat feature to just let everybody know where you're from, if you're new to the programming role or if you're experienced in it, it's just a way to say hello to the other group that's on the line. I think it's friendly and fun to get to know some of the other members that are here. So you can go ahead and use the chat feature for that. I will keep going. I also want to encourage you all as we go through the presentation, if you do have any questions or any ideas or tips or tricks of your own that you would like to share, to use that chat feature. So that's a great resource. I've seen a lot of great sidebar conversations going on in that chat feature in other webinars that we've had. So I just want to encourage you all to look for that, follow along that, and type in your own comments. I want to start by talking about our NASBA CPE sponsorship. We pay we as an AFWA National, pay $4,200 annually to be a registered sponsor of CPE with NASBA. So that comes out to a little over $2 of your national membership dues that would go towards that. And this is for those of you in chapter leadership roles, just know that that's also an expense that AFWA National covers for you. If you didn't have that affiliation with our national organization, that's an expense that your chapter might have to be incurring on your own. So that's a great benefit of being a part of AFWA and being affiliated with our organization. So we just like to point that out. Our sponsorship does include both group live and internet-based presentations. Group live are those local meetings that you're doing in your chapters when you get together and have a speaker in person. And internet-based applies to the webinars, especially those that we do from national, the e-learning presentations, where we like to offer free CPE to our members. That is a special subset of our NASBA sponsorship to be able to offer that to you. So just awareness about those formats that we can give. All of these submission requirements that I'm going to go through today are required specifically by NASBA. So these are not AFWA rules that we are making up. This is what we have, what we're obligated to follow in order to keep our sponsorship. I also wanted to let you all know this is a great benefit to potential members and members as you're promoting your programs, that as a NASBA sponsor, both IMA for their CMA programming and the IRS for EAs looking to maintain their credential, NASBA is approved with both of those organizations as an education provider. The specific attendee on their own individual, they might have to fill out some different paperwork to get it to apply. But that is a great benefit for both CMAs and EAs. The NASBA education that they're getting through AFWA does apply. Again, there's more that goes into that, but anybody who wants more information on that can look into it specifically. And then I also wanted to add finally to pay attention to your own state requirements. What we follow is the broad NASBA national overview. I know some states have other specific guidelines, specific needs that you might need related to your CPE. So if there is anything specific to your state, be sure that you're keeping that in mind, researching that, and including that with any of your own packets or CPE certificates. So certainly just wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to mention, just for a little bit of background, that last winter, or I guess it's been 2 winters ago, AFWA was audited by NASBA. So just in the same way that you as individual CPAs might be audited by the organization as far as your education and maintaining your credential, AFWA and other sponsors can be audited by NASBA. We did, of course, pass our audit. In part because we do pay close attention to the documentation that you all are submitting us. We were flagged on a few items, and I might talk about some of those later because those are pieces that we're paying specifically close attention to in the review of your packets. But I just like to inform you all of that, just so you know if it ever seems like we're being hard on a specific requirement, it is because has been proven through audit that we do have the obligation to NASBA that we have to follow in order to maintain our sponsorship. So next I want to talk about the timeline for submitting CPE. CPE packets are due to AFWA headquarters within 30 days. The 30-day requirement is consistent with NASBA standards, but of course we recommend that you submit those packets as soon as possible. One, out of respect to attendees who are anticipating approved CPE, and then also for your own benefit so that you don't lose the paperwork, and then just to get it off your own hands and get it off of your to-do list. So the longer you hold on to something, the more likely you are to lose some documentation and misplace it. So all requests for the current NASBA year are due to AFWA headquarters by September 30th. The NASBA year runs November 1, 2018 to September 30th, 2019. So in part, what this means is if you were to suddenly find a packet of information from August of 2018 that you never submitted, at this point, we can no longer approve that documentation because we've already passed that NASBA year. Everything prior to November 1, 2018 has already been submitted to NASBA. So again, November 1 through September 30th, that's the year that we are working in right now. Now, we are required to submit our list of CPE approved events to NASBA by November 1st. That's right, our year ends October 31st and all of our information is due November 1st. So because of this tight turnaround, we ask that your chapter submit all CPE held November 1 of 2018 through September 30th of 2019 by September 30th. And then for any events that you might have coming up this October, if you could at least submit your CPE request form by September 30th to let us know what you have coming up in October, that way we can be sure that that gets included in our NASBA renewal that we have to do. You can always submit the remainder of the packet later, but if you could let us know those October events in advance, we would really appreciate it. And once we get closer to that date and timeline, we'll be sending out lots of reminders via the Leaders Ledger, any other way that we can communicate with you all as leaders. So certainly want you all to be able to see that here and have an idea of that timeline, but we will be sending out reminders. So moving on, that's kind of getting past some of the requirements and now moving on to some of the materials. I don't know that I'll say the fun stuff, but some of the more specific details of what you're going to need to know as far as actually submitting your packet. So all the materials and forms that I'm going to talk about today can be found on the AFWA members portal in the programming toolkit. There you'll find lots of templates and checklists and various documents to help you with your CPE submissions. So again, when you log on to the members portal, if you look for the programming toolkit, that is where you will find everything. I will also post a recording of this webinar. Also in that section, you'll find some additional FAQs, questions that we often hear from chapter leaders as they're submitting the packets. We try to keep record of those and maintain those in some FAQs. Also, some of the NASBA paperwork or NASBA specifics are available there too, if you have any questions specifically from that. And also, while I'm thinking of it, for those of you who had registered early for this session, you should have received an email from me about 30 minutes prior to the start of the webinar with the handouts from today's session. So I should have mentioned that earlier. If you haven't seen that email yet, maybe go and look for it. If you don't have it, certainly send me an email after this and let me know that you'd like a copy of these handouts. I'd be happy to send them. So the first materials that you're going to find in both the leader or in the programming toolkit as well as in your requirements for submit are the CPE checklist as well as the request for credit. The checklist is not required for you to submit with your packet. However, it's just a solid checklist of everything you need, all the details, all the requirements from NASBA. So it's a helpful resource for you. If you submit it with your packet, that's not a problem, but it's also not required. However, what is required is the request for CPE credit form. This includes all the general information about your event. It must be signed by either your president or your CPE chair. In it, we're going to have some of the required instructor information, as well as your program description, the details of the date and the session title, and your field of study. All of that's going to be included on that form. Really, by the time you complete that form and completion, you're about halfway through your packet, which is great. There are 2 request form templates available, one for a single program and another for a multi-program. Multi-program is most useful if maybe your chapter is having a seminar where you might be having multiple sessions, either a half day or a full day. Instead of having to fill out a form for each and every one of them, we tried to compile it a little bit down to one form for you to make it a little bit easier and smooth that process. So next will be information on your speaker. We need to maintain the name, the title, and the company name, as well as a brief bio of your speaker. This can be included on the request form. There's a field for it, or if it's within the promotional materials of your event, as long as you're sending those over, you don't necessarily need to complete it on the form as well. So just as long as it's in the packet in one place or another. There are several NASBA requirements that apply to the actual speaker of your presentation. The participation of at least one CPA if your program is either an accounting or audit topic. And then if your topic, your field of study is taxes, the participation, again, of at least one CPA, tax attorney, or EA. Now, part of the participation does include even if that individual has just reviewed the document. So, for example, if you have somebody giving a presentation on accounting, but this individual is not a current CPA for whatever reason, as long as that presentation has at least been reviewed and approved by a CPA, that applies as participation. So they don't have to be the actual speaker or presenter, they just had to be involved in the creation of that. So in that case, you might submit both the name of the speaker and the name of your reviewer. And then specifically for the reviewer, we're going to need some of the information as far as their state license number and the state of licensure. So those requirements are listed in detail on the slide in front of you. But again, just wanted you all to be aware of those, specifically for accounting, auditing, and tax fields. So I want to talk about the program information that is required. You are required to submit a description and learning objectives. A few slides later on in the presentation, I'm going to break down a little bit the difference between description and objectives. Again, that may be provided within the request form itself, or if you have that in the promotions of your event and you send over that email and the promotion materials, that's fine as well. You don't have to duplicate it as long as you can see it. The timed outline is also required. And ultimately, what we're really looking for here is to confirm that you are having 50 minutes of educational content. So that doesn't mean 50 minutes of a presentation that also includes within that 50 minutes your Q&A, your speaker introduction, and all of that. Any housekeeping, any introductions, that should be outside of those 50 minutes. So that's what we're really looking for in that timed outline, to just confirm that. I have seen some chapters, they just get that timeline directly from the speaker. They ask them what are the topics you're going to discuss and approximately how long you're going to spend on each. And then the speaker can just provide that outline. I have also seen other chapters, if they got a hold of the handouts in advance, they keep those next to them, and as the speaker actually goes through the presentation, they mark a time next to each slide on the handout, and then they submit that. So they're sort of submitting the handouts and the timed outline at the same time. So that's another way that you can do it as well. So the next piece that is required is an element of engagement. I have on the screen the NASBA definition of what that is, but really we're wanting to make sure that you all are having engaging presentations, either by encouraging Q&A, maybe you can ask your presenter to have a discussion question prepared that they can present to the group, and then the group can break up into smaller discussions. Maybe you do polling or surveys during the presentation. Anything that you can do to engage your audience. We need to know what that actual element of engagement is. So if you could just write a note or specify that. And again, that field is on the CPE request form that you'll see. Then finally, related to the program are your session handouts. So this could be PowerPoint slides, a brochure, or a flyer from the presenter. If there are none available, which sometimes is the case, go ahead and let us know that. There's an option for that on the CPE request form that you can just check mark and sign that handouts were not available for this presentation. And then that way we don't bug you about it if we don't see those handouts submitted with your packet. We know that that was intentional and not submitted. So for the promotional materials, again, what we're looking for here is how did you get the word out about your event? So you might, for this, include a screenshot of the event page on your website, or if you have Eventbrite for registration and you want to share a screenshot of that. You might also include, if you have a Facebook event or other promotion on social media out that way, a screenshot of that. Or maybe a copy of your email or chapter newsletter that's going to show the details of the event. There are some specific requirements, of course, by NASBA for what they want to see in the promotion. What I like to say is, while this seems like a lot, really it's keeping in mind what your attendees are wanting. You know, they need to know as much about your event as possible in order to make an educated decision about whether or not they want to attend. So the more you can provide in your promotions, the more you're going to help with that. So I'm not going to go through this list specifically and what all of those are. We do have a template available that you can use that provides sort of a line and an outline for each of these required elements that you can go in and fill in your own information, and then copy and paste all of that and put it in your email and put it on your website or wherever that may be. One thing that I wanted to mention too is specifically about the recommended CPE. I just want to be sure to point that out and just remind you all to include that and not forget it in your promotions. Don't assume that people know that 1 hour of CPE is going to be awarded for this session. I know for me, as I'm updating the events page on AFWA's national website, if I can't readily find that CPE is going to be offered for your program, I don't assume that it's going to be, and I don't note that on the website. So if you're ever looking at our national events page and you see that some sessions, some events say that CPE is going to be offered and others don't say anything about CPE, that's just because I couldn't easily find it in the promotion, so I didn't include it. So just be sure that you are promoting that. That's an important feature of your events and something that you can provide. So be sure that that's clear to attendees and potential attendees and guests that they will be getting CPE for the event. So as I said, I wanted to kind of go over description and objective and what the difference is between the two and the importance of each. So a description provides a general overview of the topic and what the presenter will discuss. So for example, AFWA staff will go over NASBA requirements as well as your checklist for submitting chapter CPE packets for fast approval. Whereas the learning objective would complete the sentence, after completing this course, you will be able to, and then it provides key takeaways for attendees. For example, after this session, you'll understand the timeline for submitting CPE packets. You'll learn where to find helpful templates and checklists to complete your packet, and you'll learn the requirements for gaining approval for your chapter CPE. So both of these are important. Again, there's a lot of competition for CPE out there. More and more employers are providing it. There's more and more online programming for CPE. So it's so much more readily available, which means there's more competition for your own events. So attendees and guests and potential attendees want to see exactly what your program is going to be about. So just because you're AFWA and you have people that attend on a regular basis, it's not as effective anymore to just say, John Smith is going to be coming to our event to talk about taxes. You need to provide a little bit more information. People want to go back to their employers and say specifically what they're going to learn if they come to your CPE event. So it's just a way, by providing more information and more detail, to help people be able to make that decision, be able to convince their employers, and let them know that the AFWA event is the event that they want to come to and spend their time at this month. So always be sure that you're including enough information and enough of a description about the event. So now I want to talk about the NASBA programming levels. I don't believe this is required on the certificate, but it is required in the promotions of your event. There are 5 levels that you can see. I'm not going to read all of the definitions specifically, but one side note for NASBA, another requirement is that any program that is labeled as intermediate, advanced, or an update, you are required to submit some sort of prerequisite on the promotions. Now, what I'd like to say, a good tip for this is to basically use the definition of the level itself as the prerequisite. So, I think it's easy to assume in the beginning, you first hear prerequisite, you think, oh, that just means a speaker is submitting a worksheet out that they want people to complete before they come to the presentation. It's not always that. It can actually pertain to the knowledge level that you should already have in order to get the most out of a presentation. So basically, if you're doing an intermediate or advanced presentation, you want to be sure to put that definition out of what that level means to let people know that they should at least already have a basic knowledge of whatever the topic is in order to take the most of it. And again, that's a NASBA requirement. I just think that's a good, helpful tip to use these definitions as the prerequisite. So before I go on to the next slide, I do want to read the definition of basic. And that is that basic is most beneficial for CPAs new to a skill or an attribute. These individuals are often at the staff or entry level in organizations. You all are not basic. And I say that with much respect, but 59% of AFWA's programs last year were submitted as basic. I think that, I think we're a little better than that. I do. I think our members are more advanced than that. We do have a fair number of members that are entry-level students, but we have a lot who already have their CPA and who've had it for years. In a number of cases, the programming that I review, on a technical topic, to me, especially as someone who doesn't have an accounting background, it's not a basic level, but yet it's being submitted as basic. So I don't know if programs are submitted as basic because that's just the easiest term and you just write it in kind of without really thinking about it. I don't know if you're underestimating the quality of your own programming or if you truly believe it's basic. I know that especially with professional development and soft skill programming, it's hard sometimes to promote that as anything but especially when you get to the technical topics, I believe that many of the technical topics that are submitted to AFWA National are at least of an intermediate level. So I really encourage you all to evaluate your programming, push higher, promote it as higher, and don't underestimate your attendees when you're promoting the level of education that they're going to get. I think that attendees do want to learn something new and that they are drawn to intermediate and even advanced programming. Especially our members who have been, for example, I was talking to a member a few months ago, and she's a longtime member. She's been supporting AFWA and coming to programming for quite a while. She's still in a peak of her career, and while she goes to the events on a monthly basis because she wants to support AFWA, she really said, she's like, I don't really learn anything new. She's like, I mean, it's the same topics. I've been coming for 25 years. What more can I learn? And maybe it's because her chapter's just kind of stuck at this basic level of programming, and they could really try to step it up. So I encourage you to set some goals for your chapter, maybe host an advanced workshop, and you can even charge a higher registration for that. It could be advanced in tax or even computer programming or hiring, or I mean, any topic that you think you have a good speaker that you could really take to the next level. I think that could be an interesting workshop or program to host for your chapter. And then overall, just again, look at your programming and see if you're hosting more intermediate than basic programming, because we have a lot of members of that level and that quality. So I encourage you to look at that and evaluate how you're promoting your programs. So next I want to talk about the attendee sign-in sheet. This is pretty simple, of course. But again, we do offer a template for it. All attendees, especially those requiring NASBA CPE, are required to sign in. So submitting just an RSVP list from your event does not qualify for this. We actually need to see the signature of your attendees. On the template, you'll notice, I think I have a field for time in and time out. You might also want to ask if your attendees are members, yes or no. Maybe collect an email address. This is especially important if you are sending certificates electronically. Maybe even ask if they're a first-time attendee, yes or no. I think you can ask anything on the sign-in sheet. It's a great way to capture some information about your attendees. And yes, you could have a field for, are you interested in volunteering? There's a number of questions that you could ask on that sign-in sheet. So certainly check out the template, utilize it for your own purposes, customize it however you feel best. We do have a responsibility to monitor attendance. Again, this is something that came up in our audit with NASBA. And so one way that we have kind of supported or enforced this or better backed this requirement is on our template for the sign-in sheet, you'll see that we've added a paragraph that's basically saying, by you signing this sign-in sheet, you are committing to stay for the full 50 minutes of the presentation, and that the chapter leaders have the responsibility to watch for anybody who leaves early or anybody who takes an unplanned restroom break, or basically the ability to say, you didn't stay for 50 minutes of the presentation, we can't offer you CPE. So just by putting that on the sign-in sheet, it's kind of just a way to sort of cover ourselves in that monitoring element. So certainly take a look at that and just kind of understand your own, your chapter's own responsibility to really monitor as attendees come in and leave, and to ensure that they're getting the full 50 minutes. So for the program evaluation, again, we do offer a template. There are very specific questions that NASBA wants to be sure that we are asking. They're not very exciting questions if you ask me, but the ones that are on that template are the specific questions that we need to ask. When you submit your packet to AFWA, you can either submit a summary of the responses or you can submit each individual response. That's just a personal preference, whatever is easiest for you. So if your chapter does SurveyMonkey, that is, you can do that. And again, the same way, you can provide just the survey of the responses if you want. What I do want to caution you of is to make sure you are still at least getting responses from the majority of your attendees. If you find that by switching to an online survey, your responses are dropping and you're not getting appropriate response from all your attendees, you might want to go back to some sort of paper evaluation that they're going to fill out on site. So just wanted to caution you of that if you are doing an e-survey. And then finally, take these evaluations, consider providing the feedback to the speaker. That's a very nice gesture. And also utilize these to review for your own plan. Real quick, I saw a question come in. Is it a requirement that on the sign-in sheet, we have the time in, time out for each attendee? No, I don't think that's necessarily a requirement. That's really just a monitoring element. You might want to do that if maybe you're holding a 2-hour CPE session. Anything that's longer than a 50-minute session, it might be helpful to have that time in, time out, just to make sure that everybody was there for the full duration. It's just another way to monitor. But no, I don't think it's specifically a requirement. So last on the program evaluation, similar to what I said about the sign-in sheet, is really utilize these and customize these to benefit your chapter. You're already collecting feedback and information from your attendees about the presentation as it relates to, do you feel this met your expectations and so forth. But you could ask other questions. Do you have ideas about future programming topics or locations? Again, are you interested in volunteering? You could even put, do you want to volunteer at our next event? Any sort of question that you might be able to, that you can think of that might be a benefit to your chapter. You could potentially change the question every month if you want. So again, attendees are already filling it out, so utilize it to your advantage. I got another question about the evaluations. Does the summary of responses go into the packet to national? You can do either the summary of responses or each individual response. So just depending on how you do your packets and how you manage your evals, for that, I would just say whichever is easier for you to supply. So again, either the summary or the individual responses, just as long as we can see that that eval did happen and that you all did get responses. So it's easier. So next I want to talk about the certificate of completion. Again, we do have a template. There are 2 templates available, one for a single event and one for a multi-event. Again, the multi-event might be if your chapter is holding a seminar or some other multi-CPE, multi-session event. It's just a way to streamline the certificate, streamline the process. So whichever template is most accurate for you at the time. We do get questions sometimes if you can design your own CPE certificate. The answer is yes, but again, I want you to be aware of the NASBA requirements that are set for that CPE certificate. I think there's 9 or 10 specific items that are required to be on there. So if you do want to design your own certificate, I would encourage you to use our national template as a base. And make sure all of the information that we're collecting on the national certificate, you're collecting on your own individually designed. Before I move on to the next point, I just wanted to pose another question to you all, just to share in the chat field if you would like. And that is, how does your chapter deliver certificates to your attendees? And I ask this because I've seen it different ways, and I think it's just always something that people are curious about what other chapters are doing. And that is, do you submit the CPE certificate directly at your event before attendees leave? Or do you wait until after the event and after your approval and then email the certificates out to attendees later? There is no right answer to this. I think it's just interesting sometimes to hear what others are doing, to see what others are doing. So let's see, there was a question that came in. I noticed that Q&A is not included in the 50 minutes for 1 hour of CPE, but the element of engagement is included. Does this mean that Q&A, as long as I document the actual participation and time duration long, can't count as an element of engagement? That's a good question, because you're right. Let me look into that and get back to you. I think traditionally Q&A is not supposed to be counted, but you're right, it can also be counted, it should be able to be counted as the element of engagement. So let me look into that more specifically. I think that's a really good question, and see if I can find anything further on that, and then I'll let you know. So thank you for that question. I'll see what I can. So back on the certificates of completion, the one that you submit to national headquarters you can either submit each individual certificate, just a copy of each certificate for all of your attendees, or if you want, you can submit one blank CPE certificate. Well, what a blank CPE certificate is going to include is all of the information that would be required, including the signature of the president or CPE chair. The only field that's actually left blank would be the field for the name of the attendee. So why this is again, on occasion, our members are audited and maybe they've misplaced a CPE certificate or they feel they never got the CPE certificate for whatever reason. So we get a call at national headquarters, they need a copy of their CPE certificate. In that case, we'll go back through our files, we'll either find the original CPE certificate, or if there is a blank one, we can then go back to the sign-in sheet, look for that attendee's sign-in signature, make sure that they were to confirm that they were actually at that event, and then we can recreate that CPE certificate by simply filling in the attendee's name. This is something that has happened. I probably get 2 or 3 calls a year from members who are being audited and they need information that they have misplaced or for whatever reason can't find. So that's the reason that we collect the CPE certificates the way we do. Let's see. Again, I wanted to add to just be aware of any additional state requirements. So, for example, I don't know if anyone from Central Arkansas is on the line. And I don't think I've addressed this with your chapter directly if you hadn't heard, but there was recently a member who was being audited by her state, and all of her CPE certificates had been handwritten, entirely handwritten with all of the information. And the state came back and said that the handwriting was not sufficient, and that it needed to be all typed and saved in that sort of sense. So everything was fine. She was able to come back to us, and we simply reconfirmed that she was, in fact, at all of those events. In that case, if her certificates had not been handwritten, she wouldn't have had to go through that extra step of reaching out to us. So that was something unique to their state that I had never heard before. So just be sure that you're aware of your own state requirements, and if there's anything quirky or unique that you need to be aware of, take that into consideration. So the most common sendbacks, a reason that we might not approve your CPE documentation, typically it's going to be missing pieces, handouts, which again, if you don't have handouts, be sure that you mark that specifically on your request form so that we don't go back and ask you. More often than not, I would hope that you have some kind of handout, but often those are forgotten. Promotional material, maybe it's not submitted, it's forgotten, or not sufficiently submitted. And then the timed outline. I think once we added the time outline directly to the request form, it's not forgotten as often as it used to be, but that was another one that was often forgotten. Another reason we might send back or comment would be the wrong field of study, and that could be so NASBA does have a specific list of fields of study that they accept or review. There's a slide later on in this presentation that has all of those listed out for you. I have seen fields of study that weren't even on NASBA's list, or I've seen people write other that's not acceptable. So it has to match one of those NASBA fields of study. And then also in some cases, I've seen people submit it as one field of study, and upon review, we feel that a different field fits better. In that case, we might just provide a comment to the chapter that says, hey, you might want to consider changing this. And then it's up to the chapter whether or not they want to do that. But that's another area that causes us to go back and communicate a little bit more. So as far as retaining the information for your chapter, all information should be retained for 5 years. This includes all of the items here on the slide. I'm not going to read through them specifically. We do also maintain your packets at national headquarters as well for 5 years. So if your chapter is also retaining it, that means we are retaining it in 2 locations. We're always going to, I know how it goes at the chapter. Sometimes as leadership changes year over year, sometimes it can be difficult to retain information for that long. So just know that you do have national as a backup for all of the retention on those documents as well. To help you retain, you might want to consider a Dropbox or a shared Google Docs folder or Microsoft folder or whatever that might be, just as something to have shared access to those through the year. So here, as I mentioned, are the NASBA fields of study. I'm not going to talk about these. I just wanted you all to be able to visualize them and see them and have a list for your own reference. What I did want to mention is just as you're planning your programming calendar, to really consider the technical topics and the non-technical topics. I know the non-technical are easy. They appeal to a broader audience. And even as AFWA, we often promote that we really support the soft skills and leadership development and management training. So that is important, but we are also a professional association, so I think providing that technical education is equally important. I always say that a balanced calendar, balanced programming calendar for your chapter has 3 points. And 1 point might be for technical education, another for the non-technical education, and another for your social outings, whether it's a fun event that everybody goes and does together, or whether it's just a happy hour or a breakfast, just more of a networking event. So if you can cover all 3 of those throughout your year, that's going to be a great balanced calendar for you. So really keep that in mind as you're planning for the year ahead. So that's everything I had to talk about today, specifically related to CPE submissions. My email address is on the screen, both my personal. Also, CPE@afwa.org is your go-to. That's where you're going to want to submit all of your CPE packets, any question you have related to CPE. That way, whoever at the time is reviewing CPE at headquarters is going to get it directly. So I always encourage you for this topic to be sure that you message CPE at AFWA. You can also message me at any time as well. So if you do have any questions, now is a great time to ask them. You can chat them, or you can even take yourself off mute and ask it directly if you would like.
Debbie, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
This is Kathy from Milwaukee. Sorry about the cold. Number one, we only send in the names of the people who are CPAs and are getting CPA. Is NASBA or AFWA at all interested in the other attendees?
Mm-hmm. So for NASBA purposes, they only need the names of those who are wanting CPE credit. As far as the others, I know I like to keep track of how many people attend your events, just for general information. Sometimes that's nice to share with chapters as a whole, just to kind of let people know the average attendance, where we stand, see how you all are progressing. So if you would like to submit just a number somewhere of how many people attended your event, I find that helpful, but I don't necessarily need the specific names. For that purpose, it's only those who are requesting CPE credit.
What I have been doing is showing that on the listing of the questionnaire responses. I'll show the number of attending and the number who are getting CPA. So,
and that's great.
So I am sending it in. It's a little maybe hard to find, but our other program chair and membership, etc., are keeping track of attendance for their own purposes.
That's great.
Okay. Next question. Often our speakers are technical people, say a tax expert from a firm, and they're not used to being required to submit outlines and advanced handouts. Actually, sometimes they don't know what they're going to speak about until the week before the meeting, before all our literature goes out. Is there anything we can do about that little problem, which is probably my major problem?
There's not really. I mean, I understand we deal with that similar to with the national conference, where I know our conference attendees like to be able to have handouts in advance so that they can follow along in presentations, and sometimes the speakers just don't have that available. You know, I think as long as for NASBA purposes and approving your event for CPE, I think as long as we can have that after the fact, that's fine. It's really more to your benefit, maybe the benefit of your attendees, to possibly have those handouts in advance to be able to follow along. I think in that sense, you can always ask and encourage them. Hopefully at a minimum, they should at least be able to give you a description, even if it's just 3 or 4 sentences of what they're going to talk about. I would hope that they can provide that in advance of the session. And I think you should really push for that. But if you can't get the handouts, you know, all you can do is ask, really.
What about speakers who don't have handouts at all? Sometimes they want to do a kind of a brainstorming kind of thing, or total group participation or something.
Yeah, and in that case, just let us know on the CPE request form that handouts weren't available. And that's really what we expect. Typically, if we don't see handouts, we expect that it is either that sort of brainstorming, you know, session of some sort where the speaker didn't want to use a presentation, or in some cases, the speaker might have proprietary information on their slides that they really can't distribute out beyond their own presentation. So in those cases, just let us know on the request form that you don't have the handouts. You don't even have to let us know why, but just say that they're not available and we'll move on.
Okay. Yeah, often the handouts are prepared by someone else in the firm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Those were good questions. So certainly if anyone else has questions, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I can't help myself, and I'm going to put a couple plugs in here. Just a reminder that we are coming up on the August 2nd early bird deadline for the national conference. So if you haven't registered, we would love to see you all there. Conference is a great place to exchange programming ideas for your chapter, meet other chapter leaders, and find out what they're doing. So certainly I encourage you to register. The picture on the screen is actually the hotel we are going to be at. So it's lovely. It's in Orlando with palm trees and swimming pools, and it's going to be a great venue for us. I also want to mention the Chapter Achievement Awards. We did decide to extend the deadline to the end of this month. And you can submit anything. If you had just one event that was amazing last year, tell us about it. Or maybe you're really proud of the overall programming schedule that you had as a whole last year. Tell us about it. Or maybe your chapter did something really exciting that helped you increase attendance at your events. Just tell us about it. That's really just what we want to know in the Chapter Achievement Submission form. So this program is a great way to share ideas between our chapters and really tell the stories of what others are doing that's successful. So I encourage you all to really think about that, talk to your other chapter leaders, and consider submitting something for these awards. So again, you have until July 31st. And then finally, as always, connect with us on social media. We love chatting with you all and hearing from you all online. So if you're not already, be sure you look for AFWA. So With that, I'm going to hang out on the line for a little longer. You can, if you have questions, you can audio in, chat in, whichever you prefer. Otherwise, that's all I had for you all today.